So today we're going to be talking about a very simple task, but one that's very easy to get wrong. Feeding. So bonsai trees are pruned a lot to keep them small, but they need nutrients to grow. A tree in the ground can spread its roots to find food, but a bonsai tree in a pot can't. The soil in a bonsai pot loses its nutrients quickly because the tree uses them up and watering washes them away. So to keep a bonsai tree healthy, you need to keep adding nutrients to the soil. Trees need carbon, hydrogen and oxygen from the air and water from the soil to grow. They also need some simple chemicals from the soil to make amino acids, proteins, vitamins and enzymes. All organic soils have these chemicals. They come from the minerals in the soil and from dead plants. But in bonsai pots, these chemicals are soon used up, and with the increased use of inorganic soil in the modern bonsai, one or more of these elements can be seriously lacking. Nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium are the three most important tree nutrients. A tree needs a lot of these nutrients to grow well. There are also other trace elements that plants need, but they only need a little bit of them. Nitrogen helps plants grow leaves, phosphorus helps plants grow roots, and potassium helps plants produce flower and fruit. But saying this, you don't need to buy special bonsai fertilizers. Regular garden fertilizer is fine. Just make sure it has the right balance of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. The NPK rating on the package will tell you how much of each nutrient is in the fertilizer. Bonsai enthusiasts have traditionally used solid fertilizers such as small cakes of fish meal or rapeseed, which are placed on top of the soil surface and gradually release nutrients. With each watering, the main benefit of solid fertilizers is that they are continuously provided the tree with small amounts of nutrients. The main benefit of solid fertilizers is that they continuously provide the tree with small amounts of nutrients and only need to be replaced every 2 or 3 months, making them less time consuming to apply. Green Dream is a slow release fertilizer that is spread across the soil surface and absorbed into the soil after watering. So now you've got young plants, and when you're at this age, the Japanese maple or the Japanese larch, what you want to do is be pushing for development, which means you need to give a little extra and a little bit more regular feeding. And what this will do will cause everything to elongate, allowing you to work with the shape that you want. Anyway, about every 2 weeks, I would say, along with say if you do 2 weeks a granular feed and then the next week a water and feed like a liquid seaweed, and that should be sufficient. And then before you know it, you'll start getting long growth like this on the Japanese maples. That's all 1 year's growth, that is, and that's going to help thicken up the trunks. As you can see, they're in small pots. Don't always have to be in a big pot in the ground to grow the trunk. Sometimes you just need to let them grow tall. Now, in some parts of the world, or should I say some tree species, it's best not to feed them when temperatures reach above 30 degrees Celsius for long periods of time. And what I mean by that would be the Chinese junipers. So at this time of the year, if you're consistently getting over 30 degrees Celsius, it's best not to feed them, as it can be quite detrimental to their growth patterns, and it's just best to let them rest. But being here in the UK, chances of having prolonged periods of over 30 degrees Celsius, especially where I am, you wouldn't have to worry about it that much. So you've seen me just sprinkle the fertilizer onto the soil, and what you can use is these little feeding pots. These don't hold much, but I tend to use them for the smaller trees such as this cork bark elm that you've seen me worked on a couple of times this year. But all you need to do is fill them up place them into the pot and just make sure you water over them, and that will gradually release the feed into the soil, giving it all the tree's nutrients that it needs. So let's get to some do's and don'ts, and here's are the do's. Use fertilizers regularly, as they are essential for the health of your bonsai and produce strong, vigorous growth. Check the requirements of individual species, and different species may require different quantities of fertilizer at different times of the year. And here's are the don'ts. Do not feed trees when they are not in active growth, as the unused fertilizer level builds up in the compost or bonsai soil, potentially resulting in an excessive buildup of salts. Do not feed trees that are not growing due to poor health, as feeding a sick tree is unlikely to encourage it to grow and will do more harm than good. However, there is now substantial advice and scientific evidence that supports the benefits of feeding immediately after root pruning and repotting. Following root pruning, a plant requires additional nutrients, particularly phosphorus and potassium, to facilitate root growth and repair. A low nitrogen feed or zero nitrogen feed would be highly beneficial to the plant and is unlikely to cause damage to the roots. Now by this point you're probably wondering, well, what if I've overfed my bonsai? Well, it all depends on the type of feed you're giving it. If you're using the granular feed, if you think like you've put too much on, you can simply just scoop it off. But if you're using liquid fertilizer, what you're going to have to do is hose it, and you're going to have to keep on hosing it until you feel comfortable enough that all the nutrients or the excess nutrients have left the pot. And it's not just constant blasting, it's water, drain it, water, drain it. And I would probably go around 10 times minimum of just doing that. So if the nitrogen content of the bonsai soil becomes excessively high, it's definitely crucial to rectify the problem as soon as possible. And just doing this, especially if you're using liquid fertilizer, should absolutely help you. And it's just repeating the process of watering, letting it drain, and watering and letting it drain, and then missing this turnaround on feeding until the next. Now if you're wondering, no, I did not over fertilise this tree, just to demonstrate to you. I like to believe that I feed my trees well enough and healthy enough to sustain them and to not burn off the roots. So now to liquid seaweed, and what we're going to be doing today is using this little pressure washer, which I use quite often to apply the liquid seaweed, and today we're using Green Dream. You can probably see a theme here, but we're just going to use a capful in the full 5 litres, and it should be more than sufficient to supply the nutrients to the tree. So we're just going to make sure the lid is on nice and secure, and we're going to give it a little shake to make sure that the seaweed extract is all mixed into the water, and it's just pumping it to create the pressure. So now it's just a simple application of spraying all over the soil. This will also work great as a foliar feed. I tend to spray it all over the plants and the soil just to get all of its benefits. And I have also found if you give the tree a watering once over before applying the liquid seaweed, the tree is more ready to absorb the nutrients, with a lot less going to waste. And for trees that are very excessive in their growth, just like this Norway maple, I have found that the application of liquid seaweed is more ideal, especially when you're trying to maintain the growth. Now, if you can't get hold of any bonsai fertilizer, which is quite often well overpriced, You can always go down to your local garden centre, especially if in the UK, and get Westland's Fish, Blood and Bone. Works absolutely good. You just need to follow the guidelines, less is always best. And if you want your zero nitrogen, what you can do is get some bone meal, which is great for developing roots and flowering trees if you want them to flower. It is zero nitrogen, so you can also use it for during repots too. So yeah, you can pick up both of them for around a tenner each, or £10. I don't know if they sell them in the States or anywhere else in the world, but I'm pretty sure Westland is quite a big company. So anyway, if you haven't checked out my previous video on watering, it should be just coming up around about here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.